Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Overall this week, the biggest piece of news was the signing of the trade agreement, phase one trade agreement between China and the United States, which ends the 18-month stalemate, war, whatever you want to call it, between the two countries. The top 5 publicly traded U.S. companies, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, which is the owner of Google, Amazon and Facebook, now worth a massive $5.2 trillion. They account for a massive 17% share of the S&P 500 index's capitalization, which is a record. On Monday, U.S. stocks were higher. Tuesday, they were mixed due to the anticipation of the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal. On Wednesday, they closed higher, but they inched just behind the record highs. The Dow closed at above 29,000 for the first time. S&P 500 also hit a record high on Wednesday. Then Thursday, the S&P 500 hit another record high, going above 3,300 for the first time ever. And that was fueled by the retail sales data, which helped a lot because, there was a lot of optimism in regards to that data. Morgan Stanley RIG went up by 7.5%, and U.S. stock indices hit a new record highs on Friday as well, due to the investor optimism, quarter 4 corporate earnings, and the economic data. The U.S. indices are overly higher I hope that's a word in English. I say it in Spanish all the time. They are overly high. I'll just say it again for emphasis. The Dow went up 1.82% for the week. S&P 500 went up 1.99%. And the NASDAQ, if you guys don't know, that's mostly the technological stocks, went up 2.29% for the week. In overseas market news, the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin did say that even though the Phase 1 trade deal is signed, that the tariffs that were already placed on China are staying there until they start talking about the Phase 2 trade deal, which they want to start as well. The emerging markets fell from 19-month highs based on the news. European markets are mostly higher, with Istanbul and Russia being the most positive, the biggest winners. Istanbul was at 2.37%. Russia was at 2.34%. And Latin American markets that were mixed, the biggest loser was Santiago Index at 2.36%. The Mexican exchange was the biggest winner at 2.59%. And in Africa and the Middle East, South Africa was the biggest winner, 2.64%. We had some negative activity there, but they were all mostly under 1% for the losers this week in Africa and the Middle East. Asia and Australia markets are mostly higher, with the KOSPI going up 2.04%. And my dear Philippines, for all the traders out there, the markets went down 0.70% for the week. Huge news in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Most of you guys that are probably in the space already know. On Monday, which if you're watching this on Sunday, the 19th, the options for Bitcoin is actually going to continue to go, it's actually going to go live for the first time on Monday. If you guys don't remember, the CME was the first exchange to have the Bitcoin futures. The CME also, if you didn't know, is the largest exchange operator in the world. So due to the success of the futures for Bitcoin, they're going to launch the options for Bitcoin for those of you that want to speculate in that market. Other than that, the UN officials are warning people not to attend the cryptocurrency conference in February in North Korea, as it is likely a sanctions violation. And this week, Bitcoin went up 13.69% to $8,876.87. In fiscal and banking news, the deficit in the United States exceeded $1 trillion in 2019, the first time that it passed that level for the calendar year since 2012. Remember that the fiscal year for the country, the United States, starts in October, not in January like most of us that go and declare our taxes. The shortfall already since October, when it started, to now January, is at $356.6 billion. It's an 11.7 increase from a year ago. And the deficits have swelled, so has the U.S. national debt, which has reached $23.2 trillion so far. And remember, eventually, what most of you guys don't know, that whenever a country essentially starts quantitative easing, which is what most of the developed world, let's say, started overall. Even in Roman times, the Romans even did this as well, where if you guys don't know, before, they obviously used metals, gold, silver, and others to payment, to pay for things. And what the Romans started doing, because they didn't have enough money for the military and everything else, is they started to wash down the coins. So instead of being 100% silver, it started with 95, 97, then it started going down, and eventually other countries just didn't accept the payment anymore because it wasn't real coins. They finally figured it out. And that's what's going to happen eventually with the United States as well. Other than that, the U.S. has lifted its designation of China as a currency manipulator over 5 months after the country was added to that list. The nation has made a commitment not to devalue the yuan and will publish exchange rate information. The U.S. government also has started selling 20-year bonds in order to continue to finance the growing budget deficits. It's not the first time that they're doing it. Some people did report that. I saw that in the news. They actually have issued these 20-year bonds before. The last time was in March of 1986. In commodities, crude oil futures, U.S. crude went down 0.99% at $50.54. International crude, which is called Brent, went down 0.39% at $64.85. And rhodium, which is one of the now most precious metals of the bunch, rhodium actually has surged 45% this month and is the most expensive precious metal at $8,700 at a record high. The reason why it's continuing to go up is because of the stricter emissions controls. If you guys don't know, in addition to palladium, which is another precious metal, that's what goes into the catalytic converters, that box that goes in the middle of the car to help with the emissions. And since now we're getting stricter and stricter emissions from Europe and California and other countries as well, that is starting to not scare investors, but people are wondering about the supply. So that's why it's been surging so much. Gold surged as well to the 1,600 level for the first time in 7 years. After pulling back a little bit for the week, it went down 0.32% at 1,557 cents. It did cap out the 6 weeks of gains, but now it did go a little bit lower after the U.S. strike on Soleimani and then the retaliation from Iran when they sent the retaliatory missiles to the U.S. airbase. Silver, the other precious metal for the week, went down 0.39% to $18.10. In political news, Russian Prime Minister Medvedev announces that the entire government is resigning due to the fact that Putin wants to change the constitution. No surprise there, since he obviously is not going to give control of power after decades in power. Putin did accept the resignation. He thanked the ministers for their work, and he's asking them to function as a caretaker of the government until the new government is formed. Top union protesters are warning that the social economic policies of Colombian President Duque are going to restart the protests with more intensity this year here in Colombia. So far, they haven't been that bad. The Colombians are very, very nice people. They decided to set a date for a protest instead of setting subway stations on fire like they do in Chile. But that's probably going to continue. This obviously follows the protests in Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, and other parts of the world as well now. Hong Kong, France, Iran, India. We're definitely getting quite a bit of instability. Some analysts are actually predicting quite a bit of instability this year, or continued instability, I should say. Approval for Chile's President Sebastián Pinera has sunk to 6% as the protests continue in his country against elitism and inequality. Less than 50% of Chileans now believe that their country has a functioning democracy. In economic news, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin admits that the Boeing fiasco is going to hurt the GDP in the United States, since the aircraft maker is one of the largest exporters in the U.S., with the 737 MAX now grounded and more problems kind of surfacing now over time. It could impact the GDP as much as 0.5%, as I mentioned. The expectation now in 2020 is that the economy is going to grow between 2.5 and 3%, which may be closer to 2.5% due to the circumstances with Boeing. The German economy, largest economy in Europe, fourth largest in the world, went up by only 0.6% in 2019. Weakest expansion rate since, I didn't have the year there. Do you have the year? I'll grab it here in a second. But lowest or the weakest expansion rate in quite a while. the far lower than the expected 1.5% that they had for the expansion in 2018. The reason why that was affected so much is because Germany relies on exports for its economy, and the trade war, in addition to the economic situation in Europe and the world, started to slow down, so it's taking a toll on the German economy. Iran is being hit by sanctions and curbing oil sales. The economy is falling deeper into a recession. In 2018 to 2019, their fiscal year, the economy contracted by 4.6%. This year, 2020, the expectation is that it's going to contract 7.2%. And China's GDP growth expanded for 6.1% of last year. If you want to believe the numbers that are coming from the Chinese government, some analysts believe that the growth is actually far lower. I would say it's probably around 3% or lower. The growth in China was the lowest level since 1990, even though the figure still met the expectations set by analysts. In corporate news, Chow Tai Fook, which is the second most valuable jewelry chain in the world, decided that they're going to plan to shut around 15 of its Hong Kong stores, as a lot of major retailers are now planning to exit from the city's economy due to the protests that are continuing. And BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset manager, saw their profit rise by 40.3% in last year. They raised over, if I'm not mistaken, $1.3 billion in profit they had last year. This is due to the fact that more money rolled into its low-risk ETFs, exchange-traded funds, and the cash business management. Trade news. After the 18 months from the trade war, after it started, we officially have a phase one deal, which is supposedly great for everybody. Now, some of the things that are going to happen is China did pledge to buy from the U.S. American goods and services over the next 2 years worth $200 billion. The plan is to cut some of the existing tariffs, even though some are going to remain and the new ones are going to go ahead and be removed. But the U.S. also wants to see some degree of movement in regards to this move, and also start talking about and negotiating phase two to be able to go ahead and continue with the good news and continue with the deal. China is also agreeing to make structural changes of how it deals with intellectual property rights, because some people do believe that they basically steal the intellectual property of the U.S. with the forced technology transfers. If you guys don't know, a company that's going to do business in China has to literally open source the technology and give it over to the Chinese government. So that's one problem that Trump doesn't like, and they want to resolve. And the technology, Samsung and Microsoft are bringing back the push-to-talk technology. It was really popular on the Sprint phones. If you guys, I believe it was Nextel. If you guys remember, it was just a push, and it's like a walkie-talkie where you talk between phones. With the Galaxy Xcover Pro smartphone, it's going to use a chat using Microsoft's Team app to be able to market it first to first-line workers. Microsoft's also planning a $1 billion fund to encourage development of new carbon reduction and removal technologies. They want to be carbon negative by 2030, and by 2050, they want to be able to remove sufficient carbon to make up for the emissions and the electrical consumption since the company was founded in 1975. So if you guys didn't understand that, basically they want to reverse their carbon footprint and take out carbon that they used since 1975 when they started the company. Apple is going to try to be a closed loop manufacturer that doesn't rely on the mining industry anymore. They have a new robot called the Daisy robot, which can break apart 200 old iPhones an hour so that 14 minerals, including lithium, can be extracted and recycled for continuous use. In Walmart, they also are adding quite a bit of robots. They're adding shelf scanning robots to 650 more U.S. stores by the end of the year, bringing the fleet to about 1,000 robots so far. The 6-foot-tall Bossa Nova devices are equipped with 15 cameras each, can reduce tasks that took as long as 2 weeks into a twice daily routine, and also they already have robots that scrub floors, unload trucks, and gather online grocery orders. So for those of you guys that are working at Walmart, you might want to find a new job. Investment news is Strategy Analytics is saying that the sales of the Apple AirPods, if you guys don't know, the wireless headphones that Apple sells, grew by 100% year to year in 2019 to nearly 60 million shipments. They accounted for more than 50% of all the wireless headset sales in the world. After that, the second is Xiaomi and Samsung, second and third with a 10% share each. And of every dollar that's sold of the AirPods, Apple is receiving 71 cents, or about 71% of all the revenue of the global total wireless headset sales, which is pretty impressive. The company expects Apple to maintain the market dominance for at least 5 years in the wireless headset space. Clean energy investment in the U.S. surged to a new record to $55.5 billion in 2019. Besides the government's attempts to be able to roll back the supportive policies, investment surged 28% in 2018. Renewable energy costs have plunged as onshore wind and solar developers rush to qualify for the tax credits before they're scaled back this year. In international events, tens of thousands of people are being evacuated from an erupting volcano about 65 kilometers south, 40 miles south of the capital in Manila. About 144 earthquakes may signal further seismic activity. That's one of the things I think that most of us don't realize. If you guys remember the volcano that went off in Iceland just a few years ago. Now it's in the Philippines. We have others as well in Mexico. I don't think most of us realize how quickly things can change. One of these, in the case of Iceland, they literally had to stop a lot of the air traffic in Europe because of the plume that was coming through. In the late 1800s, correct the year if I'm not mistaken, Hag, but in the late 1800s, there was a volcano that spewed so much plume in the air that we literally had problem with food production the next few years after that. I believe it was in Indonesia, right?
Yeah, it was 1816.
1816. The year without a summer. So I think most of us, we kind of worry about the little things in life. And when you see these kinds of things happen, it just kind of put things into perspective. I just want to throw that out there for those of you guys that are having, their New Year's resolutions, all the challenges, columns that they don't want to finish at construction sites. Inside joke. Other than that, the world's already enormous debt load has passed the record for the highest GDP to debt ratio before 2019 was even over. The record was in the first 9 months of last year. The global debt grew by $9 trillion, nearly $253 trillion during the period. It puts the global GDP to debt ratio at 322%. More than 59% of that is from the developed markets like USA market in Europe. And China's ratio of GDP to debt is about 310%. It's the highest level in the developing world. And one of the things that I kind of want to, as I talk to you guys about my expectations and views of the world, we have a situation now where everybody's expecting China to surpass the U.S. as the largest economy in the world. And I think this kind of things, when we talk about the debt level of China, for example, I don't think that they're necessarily going to pass the U.S., at least not as fast as everybody says it is. So I'll put that out there to see kind of how things develop, because I think most of the people in the news are saying that China is going to, by 10 years, are going to be the largest economy, even though they have already surpassed the United States in PPP terms. But I don't believe that they're going to be able to do that due to what they have done, taking out debt to try to stimulate the economy. The U.S. Census Bureau reports that Phoenix, Arizona is the fastest growing United States city. In the past 2 decades, the suburb of Chandler, Arizona evolved from an agricultural-based city area to a sprawling residential development zone. And there's also been a repeated number of cities like this as well, most notably Las Vegas, Nevada. Other than that, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker reached $1 billion in sales in the first 28 days of its release. It's the 7th Disney film to be able to do so. That was released in 2019. And Japanese billionaires Yusaku Masuai, hopefully I said that right, is going to be the first private passenger on Elon Musk's SpaceX spaceship to be able to go into space. He's making a huge social media buzz with a $9 million giveaway, and he's also looking for a partner to be able to go with him. More than 20,000 people have applied. says the streaming service Abema TV. So for those of you guys that are looking for a Japanese partner or a partner in general that want to go into space, feel free to apply. You have a 1 in 20,000 plus chance of being able to go to space and finding a good husband. And other than that, I did skip one thing in the international events. UK, France, and Germany formally accused Iran of violating the terms of a 2015 agreement to curb its nuclear program, which eventually led to the reimposition of UN sanctions, which had been lifted under the deal. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. We'll see you next week.